The Honourable Rodney Hyde.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to be. I'm actually pleased to be remembered. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me first of all begin by saying publicly something that I have said privately to the Honourable Tuwharetoa, and that's to apologise to her and to the Maori Party, and indeed to iwi, for the way I presented ACT's opposition to the Waikato Tainui Bill, and this is the sister bill. And in that, Mr. Speaker, we were opposed to that bill and had concerns about the legal interpretation of spiritual concepts in that bill. And I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, I put it in a way which I agree was derogatory of people with spiritual values, for which I sincerely apologise. There's certainly there's no excuse for that, but I was trying to make a legal point, Mr. Hanare, and I'm afraid it was too easy to misinterpret, and I apologise to that. Mr. Speaker, it won't come as any surprise to the House that the ACT Party opposes this bill, and we have had some experience of some major reforms in local government in Auckland, but I believe, Mr. Speaker, and I say this to the House and to the people of New Zealand, that what this bill proposes is actually a deeper and more fundamental change to local government in New Zealand than what we're doing in Auckland. Because, Mr. Speaker, what this does is establish what's called a co-governance model for the river and for the catchment, a very valuable resource stretching across a large area of New Zealand, including private property. What we have, Mr. Speaker, at present is regional councils and local councils with enormous power over private property rights, and they can make decisions which mean life or death to a business, to a farm, to an operation in economic and social terms. We allow that, Mr. Speaker, in a democracy because in order to have that power, you actually have to stand and be elected by the community, and if your decisions prove disagreeable to that community, you can be voted out. And I think that's not a bad principle. We accept, Mr. Speaker, that it does mean minorities miss out, and Mr. Clayton Cosgrove is fond of pointing out that ACT is a minority party, and we know what it is. We know what it is to feel a minority, and I think the Labour Party support, they too know what it is to be in the minority and to feel that minority. So we understand that the majority can override the wishes of a minority, and that's why it's always important to exercise that judgment with some considerable understanding, something that we don't always get right, and again, not something that I have quite often got wrong, Mr. Speaker, but we try and do better. But I don't believe that that's a reason to overturn the governance structure. And let me explain what this bill does, because it's dramatic. It sets up, Mr. Speaker, it sets up what we call a Waikato River Authority. And what's it called now, Mr. Waikato River Authority. And this, Mr. Speaker, overrides the regional council and all the district councils. And it's made up of people appointed by the government and people appointed by the local iwi. So there's no mechanism, if you will, for the general population of the Waikato to have a say, Waikato, to have a say about who those representatives will be. That group are then charged to come up with what is going to be called a vision and strategy for the Waikato River and therefore for its catchment. And this, Mr. Speaker, trumps everything. That strategy trumps anything that central government does. It overrides, for example, if you look at clause 12.1, a national policy statement. So something that central government decides, it overrides. Well, Mrs. Tuwharetoa shakes her head. I just ask her to say this on 12.1. The vision and strategy prevails over any inconsistent provision in a national policy statement issued under Section 52 of the Resource Management Act. So I'm sorry, unless English is no longer English, that's exactly what the vision and strategy does. What it does, well, it's not cutting it out, it's explaining what this does, Mr. Horomia. The vision and strategy by unelected people overrides a national policy statement, overrides 12.1b, a New Zealand coastal policy statement, and also it requires, if we go over, Mr. Speaker, to clause 13.3ab and clauses 13.4a and b, it says this: the Council must review the Waikato regional policy statement to see whether it is consistent with the vision and strategy, and if the policy statement is inconsistent with the vision and strategy, initiate an amendment to it to make it consistent. So there you have it. The Waikato Regional Authority can have their policy statement. This Waikato River Authority come up with theirs by the iwi and government bureaucrats or appointees, and then suddenly that drives what is in the Waikato Regional Authority's policy statement for the catchment in the river, so that, if you like, the elected members in it, they actually are overridden. Well, Ms. Turia says, well, what about the mess they made of the river? Well, the question is this. This government took a lot of heat, and the Maori Party didn't support it because we overrode democracy in the Environment Canterbury. And we overrode it temporarily because of the mess that was being made. So Tariana Turia is saying, OK, what about the mess that is being made in the Waikato? So let's override democracy, not for 4 years, but forever. And in fact, yes, Tariana Turia says, and I agree with her, that's what it does. It overrides democracy for the management of the catchment of the Waikato River and the river forever. Because, sorry? Well, Mr. Davies calls out what's the overriding purpose. Well, that's interesting because it says it is to actually improve the river, right? And we agree with that, Mr. Davis. But do you agree with overriding democracy to improve a river? Because I actually understood the Labour Party was complaining about democracy. But let me go on. Sorry? Oh, I agree with the member that in Canterbury this Parliament overrode the democratic principles. It did it for 4 years. What the Labour Party is voting for is to do it forever. That's what the National Party is doing. I don't know how Mr. David Bennett's going to get on in Hamilton. I don't know how the National Party's going to get on in the Waikato when they override. Sit down, Mr. Horomia. There's a bit more to go. I know it's a long way up for you, sir. Mr. Speaker, it also says this in clause 13.4, every local authority must review its regional or district plan to see whether it gives effect to the vision and strategy, and if the regional district plan does not give effect to the vision and strategy, initiate an amendment to it to ensure that it does so. So what is happening, Mr. Speaker, is that the iwi and their government-appointed bureaucrats are driving the regional council, are driving the district councils to their plans. That means no democracy, no say by the locals. This Parliament is handing it across. This Parliament is making a mistake. Only the ACT Party, and I say this in a loving way to the Maori Party, only the ACT Party stands against this because this Parliament and the people of New Zealand will rue the day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.